Hey everybody, this is the week 3 video for SQL. This week we're going to take a look at how to use something other than the terminal to interact with Postgres, as well as start looking at the language a little bit more for getting data out and kind of making reports with it. So first thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to SSH into the box as my student user account. And I wanted to just touch a little bit on these prompts once again with a video here. So this prompt says JLake at CITPT 413. So this JLake is my username that I just logged in with, right? SSH JLake at whatever the address is. The CITPT 413 is the host name of this box. So it's just taken, this address and converted it to CITPT 413, kind of the same way that DNS works, Google.com, as opposed to having to type in the IP address of Google. So it's just showing, here's the host name of the box. So then when I say PSQL, the prompt changes here to JLake, and this is in reference to the database that I'm currently working on. So when I run, commands like this and ask for tables, I'm running it on this JLake database. Some of you have made note that maybe you start to type something in and hit enter, and the prompt changes, from this equals to maybe just a dash pointer, or maybe you open a quote. Okay, and now you've got this quote here. So it's telling you kind of what's open. So I closed that quote just there. Now it says, okay, you've got a statement open, and the way you close a statement is with a semicolon. So once I throw that in there, it's going to throw me an error, which is fine because now it lets me, run another command. So if you forget the semicolon, that's kind of one way that you'll notice it, is that A, your statement probably didn't run. Run something like this. Right, it didn't run anything, so it's waiting for the semicolon. And then it'll either throw you an error or it'll give you some response back, assuming that you did something right. Okay, so like I said, the first thing we're going to kind of look at is some of you guys have had some troubles here. Maybe you aren't able to paste into your PuTTY windows or something like that. So there's actually a tool, it's called PGADMIN. So you can just look that up and download it. I don't know what I've got going on in these windows. If I could open them up for you. Okay, so if I say PGADMIN, you can just go on here and download it. It's made by the same people that make Postgres, so you can just come on here and download it. I've already got it downloaded, so I'll show it to you here in a second. So in order for this to work, you need to add a password to your Postgres account. So right now when you log in, you have a password to the Linux box. To Ubuntu, you have a password. So, when I get to this part, I had to type in a password to get here, right? If I say, oh my gosh. So I close my connection there. So now I'm just on my local machine. Now when I SSH into this box, right, it prompts me and asks for a password. I type in my password. I set that up for you guys. But now when I say PSQL, I don't have to type any passwords, right? It just pops up. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add a password. So I'm going to alter role. I'm JLake. Yours is going to be, it'll be the same name as your database is, but it's your username for the system. You just say alter role, whatever your username is. Don't do mine. It'll tell you don't have access to change it. So alter, role JLake with password, and I'm just going to put password in here. Okay, so I'm just going to run this statement. Boom, it says it altered the role. Okay, so it worked. So you can pick any password you want. It just has to be something more than nothing. So right now, everything is kind of set up with this. So that works too, and there's not a password at all. But we need one in order to connect with this PGADMIN tool. So I'm just going to add a password for mine. It's just going to be password right now. And that'll allow me to use PGADMIN to remotely log in. You can make it, complex, simple. It doesn't really matter. Nobody's trying to access this box except us, hopefully. So once you've done that, you can download PGADMIN. Here it is for me. I'm just going to pop it open here. Okay, it looks quite similar on regardless of the type of system you've got. So we've got some things going on here. Like I said, it'll be the same Mac, Ubuntu, whatever. So if I want to add a connection, I've already got one set up, so let me just edit that real quick. So I just called mine CITPT413. The host is the same as the host that you're SSHing to. The port is 5432. That's the default Postgres port. Maintenance database doesn't really matter. You pass it your username. You can add your password in if you don't already have it stored. Mine's already stored. It's wrong, actually. It's going to ask me to change it here in a second. Say OK. It tells you there's some note. OK. So I want to connect. Like I said, it's going to tell me my password's wrong. So I'm going to go back in here and change my password if it allows me to. Okay, let's try that again. For whatever reason, it's not allowing me to change my password. All right, let me just make a new connection real quick. Okay, so I just made a new one here. That's all fine and dandy. Let's say okay, okay. Connecting. Gives me some error that PGADMIN is not made to support versions 9.3. That's fine. It works just fine. Okay, so now I got this thing over here. You see that these ones are X'd out, meaning I'm not connected to them, and this one has a little green check mark, if you can see it. So I'm going to click on this. I'm going to get this little drop down over here. It's going to tell me there's 18 databases, 2 table spaces, 17 login roles. So these roles are all of the student accounts. Table spaces are something with Postgres specific, and then the databases themselves. So if we take a look at the databases here, we have all of our student databases. So here's the one that I own, and then we have the CITPT413 one. So if I try to log in here to say, this one, it says, oh, you don't have access to it. So yours will do the same thing. But if I click, the CITPT413, I do have access to it, so it loads up. If I click my own, I have access to that as well, so it also loads up. So if we go into mine, there's a couple things in here. There's catalogs, which is really, again, Postgres information. There's extensions, again, Postgres information. Those are things that have to do with the actual database itself. There's this Sloaney replication. Don't worry about that. And then there's this thing that we care about, which is called schemas. And under schemas, there's public. So sometimes within databases, you might have kind of different versions of databases running at the same time. Maybe you have like a test version. Maybe you have a production version. Maybe you have a staging version. So these are the different schemas we're talking about. For us, we only care about what's in public. So we never really even care, to get to this level of things. So once you click on public, it's going to drop down and give you all this information. You've got views, trigger functions, tables, sequences, functions, templates, parsers, dictionaries, configurations, domains, and collations. So we don't really have anything in here right now. So I'm going to go back up here to the CITPT4131. Again, I'm going to go into schemas, into public, and you'll see I've added some tables as well as some sequences on those tables. So if we look in here, we've got a list of tables that we're going to be using for this week's assignments. And so you're now connected to the database. You can actually now connect to different databases on the server. So this is a different database than my own database. This is the CITPT413 database. And you can now see these tables. You kind of get a graphical overview. So if I go to this users table, I can see how it was created, what code was used for this. It'll just pop up here in this SQL pane. So I can, tell everything that's in it. I can also click on here, right? What kind of columns do we have? Okay, what kind of constraints do we have? We've got a primary key, we've got a foreign key, we've got some unique keys. Can also then right click or control click, and we can come down here to this properties one. I can load that up, and within properties, This is actually how you can create, you know, databases and things like that, or tables rather, not databases. And it'll pop up here and tell you, okay, you've got this. Here's your columns. Here's everything that's on them. Here's your constraints, kind of what they're doing. You can vacuum. You can change your privileges. You can inherit data from places. You can define things. It tells you who owns this database, what, you know, where the schema exists at, the OID within the database, the name of the table, whether or not you should be using Sloaney or not. So this is what you guys kind of care about. You kind of care about these, you know, within this table itself, what are the column names? What's the, you know, data that's set up in here? So I'm going to come back out here and I'm just going to say real quick, view data. Give me the, yeah, let's go with the top 100 rows in this thing. So this is just going to run a quick query. I didn't actually write anything to do that. It just kind of did it automatically. And this is going to be, you know, within this database, within this table rather, within the users table. Kind of, you know, we've got this ID column, we've got an alias column, we've got an email column, we've got password, we've got when they were created, when they were modified last, the language that they're using, what currency, their PayPal email, their street address again, city, state, zip code, their country, which is an integer and links to another table, their key, and then whether or not the user is active. So this is, you know, this is some data from a site that I run. So this is real data. You know, these passwords are encrypted, so quite long. So this is just, you know, some sample data that we're going to be messing around with, but you guys need to know the names of these columns in order to properly run some queries on it. So within here, if you want to run a query, there's this little button right here. It says execute arbitrary SQL queries. So I'll just run the same query that we just saw basically, which is from users. Okay, and then you press this little green button. Okay, it does it, and then down here in this output pane, it's going to retrieve the data. So you'll notice it's pretty much the same. It's not in the same order, because I didn't add an order or anything like that, but for now, don't worry about that, right? We got some data, okay? It's what it's meant to be. There's also a graphical query builder. Loading here. It's kind of slow because it's over SSH, so you got to give it a second. So it'll allow you to say, okay, you know, here's this. We can go into the schemas. We can go into public. We can go down to users. I can say, give me this maybe. Okay, if I double click on it, it'll bring this up, right? What do I want to select? I want the ID, I want the alias, okay. Is there any criteria? Is there any order you want to use? Is there any joins? So we'll see all this stuff a little later on, but this is, you know, a graphical way that you can do kind of the same things. Yeah. So here it gave us, you know, select, we'll kind of see what this is here in a minute. It gave us the SQL to really do this. So if we clicked on all these things, should basically give us the same query we had, which is select star. Yep, go ahead. So this is just directly saying the name of everything. It's the same as doing this. So we'll talk about that here in a second. So if we were to run that, right, it's going to get the same 54 rows of data. If we were to run the one that they had in there, it would do the same thing. Again, 54 rows of data. Okay. So this is a different way if you want to use this, if you feel more comfortable with this, if you want to write your code, you know, in something that's allows, you know, I can move around, I can click my mouse, you know, I can make mistakes, whatever, I can test it out. I don't have to worry about the semicolons thing. If I write this, you know, it's still gonna run my code with or without the semicolon. So this is just another option for you to use. Most places of work allow this locally, but when it comes to like actual servers, you're not going to be able to remotely connect to them through this. It's not very secure. I set it up for this class just because I know it's going to be easy, but for the most part in the real world, you're going to be messing with something like this. Okay, so back to this. So if you alter your role so you can use PGADMIN, which is fine, go ahead and do that. But if you want to use that table that you're seeing, if I just say PSQL, you know, I'm only ever connecting to this database that's associated with my name. So if I wanted to connect to the CITPT 413, I have to add this -D. Might be too far down the screen for you guys to see. So when I call PSQL, I say PSQL -D CITPT 413, and then I will connect. You'll see here it's no longer says JLake. It now says, okay, well, you're on a different database now. So I'm on the CITPT 413 database, which is where we want to be. Again, you know, I know that there's a users table, so I can run that. Okay, it's going to populate all this data. Great. Okay, so let's talk about select statements now. I gave you guys this one last week, you know, select asterisk from users or from some table, you know, but we never really, I didn't really cover what that does other than you can test to see if your data went in by using that. So really the first statement you need to learn here, this read statement, is hey, give me some data from the database, is this statement that starts with select. So we've seen, you know, we've seen create table. If I could type, and we give it a name, and then we pass in, you know, a column name with a column type, so on and so forth. We do something like that, right? Error. Obviously, these aren't real. We've also seen insert into table name values blah blah blah. Okay, we've seen that as well. So that's how you would, you know, create a table. This is how you would put data into that table. Now, you know, this is how we get data out of it, is with this select statement. And this is kind of where the main focus of the class will be on for the next, I don't know, 10 weeks or so, is really how do we leverage this select statement to get the data that we want in the way that we want it from the database, assuming that, you know, it's possible that the database is set up properly, all these types of things. So really kind of, you know, the catch-all is this asterisk. And what we say is, hey, give me this data from, okay, some table name. Okay, so once we, you know, get on here, I can say /DT. This gives me the name of all the tables. So these are all the tables that are available to me under this database. So we have one called access, one called comments, one called countries, one called course professor, course school, courses, so on and so forth. I just happen to be using this users table just because I know it has a lot of data in it that's kind of, you know, easy to understand. So once we know that there's a, you know, a users table, maybe I want to say, well, what does that users table look like? Well, I can say /D users, and it's going to give me a breakdown here, and say, okay, first and foremost, let's talk about all the columns. You know, we've got this ID, we've got an alias, we've got an email, we've got a password, so on and so forth. It's going to tell you what type these columns are. It's going to tell you any modifiers on these columns. So here you'll notice this ID is an integer. It's not null. It's, you know, default value is this next value in this sequence. So you know that this is actually a sequence. It's not simply an integer. It's a sequence, meaning that it's going to auto count upward whenever you enter some data. So, you know, alias can't be null, email can't be null, and password can't be null. The rest of these things, they can all be null. They don't really care. We've got characters of varying, you know, widths. We've got timestamp with a time zone. We've got a character varying here. It doesn't even have a max. This country is an integer, which, you know, you got to be careful of things like this, knowing what that means. That, you know, you're not putting in the country as U.S. Not going to work. Then we've got this active field, which is a Boolean. So that's a little about, you know, it tells you about the columns and their types and kind of any modifiers on them. Then it'll tell you any indexes. So we talked a little bit about primary keys, foreign keys previously. So you can see, you know, if there's keys on any of these things. So the user's P key, primary key, you'll notice here is on the ID field. So that just says your ID field is your primary key. We have some unique constraints, meaning that the alias whatever I enter as an alias for one user can never be used again for another user. So if I put in my name as Jake Lake, there cannot be any other Jake Lakes entered into this table. It'll get denied, meaning that it failed this unique constraint. Same on email. That way, you don't have people signing up for the site twice. It just gives them an error and tells them, hey, they already have an account. So it's just some stuff that can be done in the database as opposed to being done in code. You'll see there's a foreign key here. We didn't really touch on this too much, but it says foreign key country, meaning the field that we've got up here called country, which is an integer, references countries, meaning there's a table called countries, and the table called countries has an ID. So it has, the same type of field that we have here, an ID, probably some integer. Okay, so this foreign key country references this country's table ID, and then whenever it gets updated, cascade that update. If it gets deleted, delete it here as well. So that would mean that if in the country's table, the ID were to change, say right now, ID number 1 is associated with the United States of America. If for some reason the ID changed to, let's say, 500, this table, anything that referenced 1 would also update to 500. So this is kind of a smart database in that way that you don't, now have no ID 1 in this country's table, and you have a bunch of 1s here that you no longer know what they go to. And then it kind of tells you, here's what this table is referenced by, meaning that there's some other tables that have foreign keys that reference back to this table. So we can see, this comments, there's an author and it's associated with some type of user. Notes has an author, also associated with the user. Ratings, same thing. Transactions, same thing. User access schools and unavailable schools, pretty much the same thing. They all reference back to here. So that's how you can kind of get a breakdown to know what's in the table. And that'll come in handy as we kind of see things here. So I want to talk next about this select statement some more. So within the users table, we know that there's an ID column, right? So if I run a statement like this, I say select ID from users. It's going to give me all the IDs in the table, right? Okay, here's all the IDs. So this select statement looks like select, we give the column name from the table name. So if I real quick check here, I don't remember off the top of my head. Okay, so there's an alias table in an email, or an alias field and an email field. So let's say I wanted to show you the ID, the alias, and the email. I can say select the ID, alias, email from users. And I just get those 3 columns. Here's all of them, right? Just the ID, the alias, the email. Okay, so let me go back in here and see what else is in there. Let's go down here and grab this key field and this active field. So it doesn't really matter what order we put these things in. We have control of that. So what if I want the key, and then I want the last thing to be, well, we can go like this. Active and then email. Okay, so now it goes ID, key, alias, active, email. So we have control of how the data comes out by, putting the order here that we want it to be in. You just separate it with commas. So that's kind of, column selecting and ordering in its simplest sense. We can also do something, say we want to add just some text, right? Some ID, and then I want to say awesome. And I put it in quotes. So if I run that, it says ID, and then it has a column that it doesn't have a title for. And it just says awesome on all of them, right? I can just throw some strings in there. And it's got my key, my alias, my active, my email. So that's another possibility. And you might be thinking, well, why would anyone want to do that? That sounds not very intelligent. Well, the reason is due to this thing called concatenation. So maybe we're looking here and we want to say, we want the alias and the email to kind of go together. So I want alias and email to be one field. Well, I can concatenate them with this double bar. And then I want to put a space in between them, and then double bar. So what we've got here is it's going to be one row. It's going to say alias, have a space, email. if I run that, you'll see we've got ID, we've got key, we've got active, then we've got a column without a name, and it's multiple things now combined. Here's the alias, space, email. Why is that something you might want to do? Maybe you have a first name and a last name field, but when you get the data out, you just want full name. Or maybe you want last name, comma, first name in the report, right? So it's possible to do that. This is called data concatenation, and it just means that you're taking two things and making them into one. So when you do that, if we go back and I run this again, you'll notice up here it says, well, your column doesn't have a name on it. Okay, so let's get out of here and let's give it a name. So the way we can give it a name is I can call it. So alias, I've got this, concat, some spaces, concat, email. Well, right after that, I can just give it a name. Maybe I just want to call it alias email. Okay, so it goes ID, key, active. Now it just uses whatever I threw in there that I didn't have, anything. So I've got this email, then there's just a space and then a name. We can actually rename any of these columns that we want to. So say I've got this, key, and I want to call it the secret or something, I can just throw that on there. Now when it calls it, the header is secret as opposed to key. By default, it's going to use whatever the column name is. If you pass in some value right after the column name, it will simply use that instead. There's no quotes, there's nothing. You just type it in. So that's pretty simple. Everything in the assignment you should be able to do after watching this video. So if there's any questions on anything, let me know. Basically all we're going to be doing this week is selecting some data. So what I want you to do is to show me the statement that you used to select the data. Throw it in like a Word doc or a text doc or something very simple, and then just send me that. Just show me the select statement that you used, and then copy and paste the data that it gave you back. So if you run something like this, and it gives you, this colon down here showing you that there's more data, don't worry about that. Just copy what you can. And I'll gather that there's more data. We're not limiting anything, so I just want to make sure that we're getting the hang of grabbing the right columns and naming them and using aliases and things like that. I'm not too worried about the data at this point. We'll get there. Okay, so that's all. Thanks.